Yesterday, for the third time in really about the last 3 or 4 days, there has been another record number of air attacks from Russia into Ukraine, from the drones and from the missile strikes. They continue to be hitting important events or targets, rather, inside of Ukraine, continues to weaken the fabric of their industrial capacity, of their energy capacity, all of which has direct weakening effects on the front line. And of course, on the front line, we continue to see Russian forces advancing, especially in the Sumy area and in the Pokrovsk area and Kupiansk on the eastern front. Now, we're going to try and see if we can figure out what all of this stuff means today, especially in light of some very interesting conversations that had occurred in the West on ABC News, where Volodymyr Zelensky was interviewed by ABC, and in Moscow, where Sergei Lavrov was one of many people up on a dais that was talking about the future of Russia in out to the year 2050. What we're going to see is when you combine all that stuff, as we always like to do, words are important and what people say matters. But the only thing that really matters is how the words and actions on the ground, in reality, how it lines up. And when you see two very different versions of reality, one being talked about by Zelensky and one by Lavrov, we'll see how it matches up with the ground reality. And to help us make sense out of that, we got one of our best guests that we have, especially on anything that has to do with what the situation looks like on the Russian side, and that's Andrei Martyanov, veteran author and Russian military expert on the YouTube channel Smoothie X12. Andrei, welcome back as always.
My pleasure, as always, Danny.
Well, before we even get into some of these dueling interviews that were that happened yesterday, what do you make of the fact that Russia has, I guess, really, depending on how you count things, really the third out of 4 days where it was some kind of a record of attacks in the air going against Ukraine, all of this in response, or at least following what happened in the Russian bomber fleet. I don't think we've had you on since that time. And I wonder if you could just kind of, first of all, give us your assessment of the ramifications against Russia for that bomber attack. And then how has this reaction since played out?
Well, and here is the issue which we need to address immediately. Before the attack on the Russian bomber force, which was actually, as always, a complete PR, 2 bombers have been damaged and they will return to service after repairs. It's people forget. 2 passenger plane, one passenger and 1 cargo trains have been basically blown off the rail tracks. In the passenger train, there were 135 casualties, number of dead civilians, and very many, well, naturally, when you have your train derailed, very many traumas. And so it was a pure sheer terrorism. And that's what many people should keep in mind. Bomber force, although it's a part of the nuclear triad, the strategic bomber force, it's no matter how you play it, it's sort of, a legitimate target, if you wish. Stupid, obviously, which Ukraine did, because you do not go and try to attack one of the pillars of the strategic force. But the terrorism against Russian civilians is ongoing. And yesterday, there was a first confirmation that, for example, in Kursk region, which is essentially, Russians call it now NATO forces, the whole village of Ruskaya Porечная have been executed. All civilians, children, women, old people, all of it have been wiped out by the troops of what is called Armed Forces of Ukraine and so-called, mercenaries, volunteers. So, and a reaction is primarily on the terrorism. And of course, Russia reacts also to the attack on the bomber force. But this special military operation now begins to migrate towards counter-terrorism or anti-terrorist operation. And that
I did find that interesting when we actually played last week, when Putin's comment about how he now views the current regime as a terrorist, that he cited the train derailments and other terrorist acts, and he didn't even mention the attack on the bomber fleet. Like that wasn't his primary issues there. That was interesting.
Yeah, because the primary issue, which is happening right now, and FSB has its hands full. There are a number of the terrorist acts which have been prevented, including near the just production plants. And obviously there will be attempts on Russian military and civilian people and officials. So, and that is why it's becoming counter-terrorist operation. And essentially that means that Vladimir Zelensky himself personally and his surrounding is a target now, and they will be killed.
And so let me ask you before we get too much further into it here, I want to take advantage of the opportunity we have to talk to you about this. Let's look specifically at the attack on the bomber fleet, because by many accounts, in terms of just the tactical execution of it, it was 18 months in the building. It was still, whatever the actual number was, it was still pretty effective in terms of how it attacked. But the thing that I found of interest in, and this is what I'd like your view on, is that according to the Russian side, there were 5 different bases that were attacked, but aircraft were only destroyed on 2 of the 5, which implies that the base defenses were effective on the other 3. First of all, let me just ask you about that. Is that news information accurate?
Well, it's not quite. There are the main, so to speak, point of this thing was, which by the way, many people picked up on this line that, oh yeah, they struck 2,500 miles inside the Russian territory in terms of their Irkutsk airbase, which is near city of Irkutsk, which is actually by the Lake Baikal. So it was like, oh yeah, that's, but it was very clear that it was the inside job. And as it was there for the last years, essentially, much of the drone attacks, they go from the Russian territory on all kinds of the Russian facilities. And you know as well as me that for partisan, diversionary, and terrorist activity to be successful, you need to have the population, which at least part of it, significant part of it, supports this activity. And this is the issue not of the air defense. This is the issue of the counterterrorism and counter-diversionary actions. People say that FSB blew it up, or blew it, so maybe. But essentially, these were inside attacks indeed, and they were following the same pattern as which is penetration. And that's what it was. It's pure diversionary action in which you can do very little with your air defense, because if you open, as it was shown, this container with the those drones, and you open it and launch them within 2 kilometers of the airbase, for example, on the highway or the back road, you don't have much time to react for that at all. And that was the whole idea, because they know if they launch anything, whatever they launch, those especially aircraft type drones, long range drones, they are all shut down. So, and that was the whole idea. What is known, one of the old AN-12, which is transport airplane from 1960s, actually. The latest one, they stopped producing them like in early 1980s, was destroyed. 2 of the Tu-95 MS have been damaged, but they will be repaired. And we know that at least one Tu-22M M3 was damaged too. But they say that all of them will be returned to service. But the most damning evidence of much of it being fake, you could find it, which they didn't even understand what they were attacking. They attacked not even washed out A-50, old first versions of the Russian AVAX, equivalent of AVAX. And when they started pointing and showing those videos and shots, how they attacked them, people started asking why they are without engines. Those planes were without engines, and they attacked them thinking that they are actual, a viable asset. As the result, they attacked the planes which were supposed or destined for disposal anyway. And so that's why everything what they started talking, of course, they came up with the ridiculous numbers. But you already know, Russians lost 150 million people. They killed, so they killed several iterations of Russian army. So reality is it was pretty much nothing burger except for the fodder for the primarily Western media, which many of them support Nazi regime in Kiev. And it was the fodder to discuss those things like how they did it and whatever it achieved. In reality, it is the issue which many people won't tell you, but it's the issue with the Ukrainian diaspora in Russia. Not all of those people are bad, by far not, but very many people, especially starting from 2014, when Russia did a stupid thing, just giving them passports of Russia, and with it, they produced and imported a truckload of the sleeper cells, which are operated by NATO intelligence and GUR and MI6 and CIA. So that is being corrected as we speak, but that attack on the bomber fleet was exactly what it was designed for. But reality is, by far the biggest story was already starting to do the diversionary acts, which are essentially terrorism of derailing the passenger trains and killing civilians. That's
so what is the current risk? It's if that took 18 months to prepare, and then they got whatever the actual number was, some kind of damage was clearly done. We saw the explosions on a lot of this. So what is the threat now? Like, in other words, could they repeat this elsewhere at another airbase in Russia?
Probably not. But you can never be 100% sure, especially when you have several million strong. Russia actually accepted several million refugees from the former Ukraine, starting from 2014. And
that many.
So it is a very substantial community, which is, of course, spread all over Russia, especially in the European territory. And many of those people, they are in Russia not to be loyal or anything. They are there to collect their social payments and continue to hate Russia as they always did. So, and what can I say? There can never be 100% guarantee. But now, and even Larry Johnson, our good friend, he reported from Moscow yesterday. You can sense now that things went on a different path. There is a significant military police presence on the streets, especially of Moscow. Counter-terrorist operation is starting now. And as the result, it's obviously has several prongs, including domestic one, which is the counterintelligence. And this is what FSB does. This is essentially what FBI would be doing essentially in the United States, should it have been that kind of threat. So, and I'm sure there were a number of arrests. People were caught, like yesterday, the group of the sleeper cell again, either manipulated by Ukrainian CIA, MI6 people, or some of them are dedicated, let's say, assets. They wanted to assemble this. It was hidden in different places. They assembled the explosive device, and they wanted to bring it through on the territory of one of the Russian industrial plant, which produces some of the military equipment. They were apprehended. It was the operation there, but it's going to continue to happen. Absolutely.
So let me ask you this question here. If you look at the frequency of these attacks, they seem to really have been stepped up over the last month, maybe month and a half, as compared to the first part of the war when there was very little of that, or at least not very much that was successful. Do you think that it has escalated from the Zalinskys regime lately? And if so, why has it escalated now, this late in the war, when it seems like for all intents and purposes, we should be coming to the end state?
No, it's precisely escalating because, as many people already noticed, including even surprisingly in the West, that Russia already won the war and defeated NATO. The question is that the terrorism is the weapon of the weak. And what is happening on the front line, and especially what is happening now in the rear big time, that's the reaction. They will continue to do this. And again, never underestimate the fanaticism of many people who actually fight there. And what can I say? It is the issue of it is the issue of the also psychology and national character. And that's why I always say the litmus test, and many people do not forget it, do not want to address this. When was the last time that Vladimir Putin stated that Ukrainians are brotherly people? More than a year, you haven't heard this because even he got the message. Vladimir Putin being a very calm, resigned guy, so nobody in Russia believes that Ukraine is the brotherly people. They are aggressive state used as manipulated by NATO, and as such, Ukrainians proved to them precisely what they were trying to do and brainwashed to do. They hate Russians. I mean, that's what it is. And I know from my personal experience, believe me, I've been there, I communicated, and I had very many encounters when you understand, when they talk to your face and you say, you're lying, so it's just the way it is. And some people say it's tragedy. It's not. I wrote 10 years ago, 10. I love internet. It maintains all records that however ugly, however badly it will end for them, but Ukraine already then coalesced into the nation, political nation. It might have had, 3 ears, 1 eye, and 5 hands, a freak nation, but it coalesced, it exists, whatever it is. It might not have the long run, which you can't, like the Third Reich. But it is what it is. It is the political nation with a very specific set of attitudes, with a very specific internal culture, if you wish. So, and the brainwashing, you have to give it to, say, CIA or MI6 or others. They knew who they are dealing with, starting from 1990s when the whole thing collapsed, because they knew on what kind of fertile soil all those ideas, which existed before, really. They summarily amplified them of Ukrainian nationalism, Ukrainian exceptionalism, and deeply hidden, but nonetheless, a complex of inferiority towards Russia. And as a result, that was the foundation for the hatred of Russia. And many of them hate Russia and Russian people. Very genuinely.
Yeah, well, so we'll see how that's manifesting right now, and then at the end, I want to talk about where it could go next. But as I mentioned at the top of this, ABC News interviewed Zalinskys over the weekend. I had a number of problems with it. I'm sure you probably did too. I may have some different ones. We're going to get to that in a minute as well. First of all, let's talk about, because one of the questions that was asked of Zalinskys is that Trump, by the way, recently said what you said a second ago, that Russia's winning. You actually say has won, past tense, but at least Trump said Russia is winning. And so she asked him, what do you think about that?
President also telling me he would like more communications with President Trump, saying there are people who communicate with the president more than me, and they deliver different messages to him. Does President Trump believe that Russia is winning this war, do you think?
Yes. It's not true. It's not a victory when you really spend 1 million people.
So what do you make of that? That it's not true that Russia's winning the war. What say you?
Well, yeah, he said million. I don't know why he didn't go for the, for jugular and said 5 million Russians died, because the heroic armed forces of Ukraine did it. I mean, I don't know. You know what? American establishment media is a sewer. And so I do not accept them in any way. I see no value in them. People who continue to do that thing there, they are, as I already stated, establishment means what? Some of them trolls them, some of them just straight out propaganda outlet. And you know what? At some point of time, Hitler was actually, I believe, accepted or declared the Man of the Year somewhere in the Time magazine. So yeah, what's the difference? I see no difference between terrorist Zelensky, of which I was talking about since the very inception of that, and this bimbo which sits from ABC and tries to interview him. It's garbage. And so if anybody wants to consume this garbage, I am in no position to dissuade them. But I mean, you cannot not only trust, I will quote myself for years. If you are in the same room with any CNN, NBC, or Fox guys, do not forget to take a good course of antibiotics, because otherwise you, so in this case, it's like I need to comment on the one cocaine dependent, the guy, I mean, who is Zelensky. And they ask him questions which his responses are obviously predictable. But yeah, sure, if he says 10 million Russians died and he won and his troops are surrounding Kremlin as we speak, they will buy it. They will develop this idea. They will be asking him the questions which continue to soft question to allow him to continue this narrative, which, of course, we know is, well, basically from Biden administration. Nothing changed.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that did really trouble me or aggravate me, I guess I could maybe even say, from watching the interview, because all they did was ask questions and let him say whatever he wanted, and they never challenged anything. They never say, wait a minute, okay, so there's been, you claim, 1 million Russian casualties, but you can't possibly logically and rationally say that the Ukraine side hasn't had at least as many, and there are many millions more in Russia. So how does that work for you? They never asked him any hard questions like that. It was just a softball thing, which of course allows a narrative to be born and maintained on the Western side, which is not journalistic. It's problematic for me, but
it's propaganda. And you know what? I want to add one thing. Most of those people who work there, even if to admit that they have any kind of human and professional integrity, I don't know what this professional journalism is. It's nothing but the glorified English language, degree. But the point is that they wouldn't even know what to ask. None of them understand anything related to the modern warfare. They are people who went for the soft degrees to become credentialed idiots from the Harvard Ivy League schools, to get their humanities dumbed down degree. They might have as well visited the University of Phoenix, to get the MBA online. What difference does it make? I am on the record. If you have Harvard, Stanford, or Princeton guy with degree in journalism or political science, that should serve as the disqualifying things to be hired onto any serious job which requires actual serious professional skills and logic and knowledge. So that's simple as that. I've been on it for years, and that is why when I hear you know what, I applaud Thomas Massie. When he was questioning a year ago, I believe, in the subcommittee, some dude from Biden administration and said, what are your credentials? Thomas Massie, one of few people with the actual MIT degree in engineering. And he says, I have PhD in political science. And Thomas Massie just went so you call this pseudoscience a science? You don't know? So it's wonderful. You can find it on the YouTube. It's just absolutely, he wiped the floor with whoever was the piece of administration of Biden. So this is what it is. They wouldn't even know what to ask. Can you imagine explaining how to plan operation, for example, on the division level for some dude from CNN?
Right. And in the category of questions not asked, one of Zalinskys' favorite things is to have his little selfie videos that he makes all the time, because then no one gets a chance to ask any questions anyway. But in light of that previous one where he's claiming that Russia isn't winning and he's in a fight, and of course you would think ordinarily if you're fighting in a war, you would like to be able to win it, or otherwise, why are you engaged in something that you can only lose? But that piece seems to be some of the mentality. I'm going to show you this clip here from Zalinsky here on one of his recent selfie videos, and notice the definition or the terms he sets for what he's calling success in the war.
Інтенсивно бойові дії тривають на Покровському напрямку, також в районах Курської операції, також в прикордонні Сумської області, всюди. Російська тактика одна. Вони не рахують втрати і намагаються просуватись, штурмують наші українські позиції і хоч метр, хоч щось хочуть отримати. Але цей їхній потенціал все ж не безкінечний. І тому певний рівень російських втрат, наша активність мають стримати і стримують російське просування.
So you're setting as a standard to hinder the Russian advance. And you talk about the millions. We just talked about, forget about all the other categories of war. In manpower alone, Russia has millions more to put into this fight if it need be. And so it's almost a physical impossibility to fight an attritional war when somebody has that big of an advantage over you. And yet, even in his own mind, the metrics he's using, I want to succeed by hindering the Russian advance. Well, by definition, that means you will eventually be ground to nothing. Then why is he continuing to fight?
Well, he is, first, he's controlled from London now. I mean, he's defining, well, Trump is irrelevant here now. He is controlled from London, and obviously expect from the guy who is a clown and who played piano with his, extremity, that he understands Ossipov Lanchester attrition model, which is the foundation of the operational planning, and how it happens, especially when you factor in combat effectiveness. So yeah, he has to say something. And what it happens is that Ukrainian armed forces are heroically advancing to the west, heroically retreating, while Russians, covertly advancing. So yeah, sure. What can I say? It's a delirium. It's very difficult to even respond to this because. How can you respond to that? It's just like,
Andrei, on that point, I was in a certain X Space Live last week, and there was some fellow that was debating me on the other side of one of the arguments, and he said, to your comment about the heroically withdrawing, he said, when you're in a retrograde operation, the point is that you extract a higher casualty rate on the advancing troop, and so by doing that, you're winning. And I said, wait, are you serious? I mean, you're withdrawing and you're losing, and you have this side has a superior firepower, and you somehow think that that's a good thing. But he did, and he the guy had never been in combat, but he read a book once where it said that's the deal, and so he just projected that as though it's reality, and it's a lot of people have that bizarre idea.
Yeah, but then again, yeah, you have to. Those people do not understand this. They know it from entertainment and read some book which was written completely oblivious to the overall global experience of any kind of operations. And here we have the operations of the 21st century, 2025, and actually the way Russian armed forces fight is today, 2025, is very different from 2022, because you look at the totality of the effort on the level of the state. This is actually my latest post about some guy. He was NCO in Special Forces, and he comments now football, NFL, and he writes in this national security journal from Harvard about that Russian are about to collapse. Russian economy is about to collapse. Why did he think so? I mean, and you ask, they do not have answers to anything. There is no, reference points which constitute absolutely combat experience, knowledge, education, and things of this nature. And you're absolutely correct. When you say, okay, here is the attritional model, this is how operations are planned, this is what is taught in the serious war colleges and all that, and if you factor in combat effectiveness, what do you have? Many people still believe, which is shocking, that is not even their calculus or whatever. This is basic mathematics, basic arithmetics. They believe that drones define everything. When you explain today to them, guys, do you understand what is the artillery battalion of self-propelled guns? Do you understand what they can do? They think, oh yeah, you launch like 50 drones. They can lay the amount of their fire impact, those fires, which make drone warfare is just small little portion of that. But you know what? They have to understand it from mathematically. When you have, for example, 155 or 152, 30 self-propelled guns, what's going to happen? They can shoot for an hour and they will literally, with the drone, the maximum you can do is to hit probably one vehicle or kill 2, 3, maybe 5, soldiers. When you have the fire, and especially when it, combination of all kinds of the artillery fires, it could be it's a devastation. And suddenly you fly your couple drones, you kill, let's say, squad in the dugout somewhere, but a strong position, strong point, for example, of the platoon, and let alone company, still there. But when you have the battalion of artillery laying the fire there, it's over. There will be only the tiller.
Yeah. it's all a combination of all this stuff. It's not any. There's no wonder weapon, no wonder category.
It's always
all of it. It's got to be how it's used. Want to go back to that same ABC interview a second ago, because again in the terms category of questions not asked, this time another thing that the interviewer doesn't ask is when Zelensky is again, one of his favorite things he's been doing for the last couple of months is trying to shame Vladimir Putin in the Western public by saying he didn't even want peace. Well, there is some truth to that, but watch how this unfolds.
With all due respect to President Trump, Zelensky says, I think it's just his personal opinion. Trust me, we understand the Russians much better, the mentality of the Russians, than the Americans understand the Russians. I know for sure Putin doesn't want to stop the war.
Well, if you mean Putin doesn't want to stop the war today in a way that advantages you, yes, he does not want to do that because he has all the advantages. So he's going to push forward and he's going to win. Why would anyone want to stop the war when they have the advantages and the capacity to achieve a victory instead of handing one? That's the part that just doesn't make any sense in what she didn't ask.
Well, she probably wouldn't even understand that. And actually, not probably, it is 100%. Again, if you imagine that she wanted to challenge him, he was making political statement and obviously the bizarre political statement, but she wouldn't understand, again, operational reality on the, on the battlefield. And what you absolutely correctly stated, I mean, you have to be a complete idiot to stop your advance and when your dynamics, and you can actually increase the effort, what is called in terms of, that's the operational and tactical term, it's called the increasing of the effort, наращивать усилия, or aggregate the effort. So, and Russia has all the keys for that, but of course she won't ask. Of course she won't ask. Why would she? They sell narrative. They always did now in the last, I mean, it is a catastrophe, obviously. They understand they need to spin the situation. First, many of them are not what you would call conservative or whatever, just normal people. Many of them are the fanatical supporters of the DNC. These are DNC-controlled media and some other people who are very close to the Democratic Party. So for them, they have to spin it now as a Trump loss. While in reality, the loss and defeat happened during Biden administration. Trump's situation is aggravated only by his fact not understanding the reality to, early to stop this. At least looks like he wants, at least he wants to get the hell out of the way. But Russians don't buy it either. So, and Lavrov told, about this today.
Yeah. In fact, we're gonna shift over to Lavrov now. There was an event in Moscow yesterday. I think it was called the Forum of Future 2050.
Yep.
Which, as it turns out, one of our friends and colleague, Larry Johnson, was there. And he told us beforehand, by the way, that he was going to Moscow for something. He said, until I get there, I can't really say anything about it. So we didn't even mention it on air. But lo and behold, look at this whole dais there full of all these people. And who is that on the outside there? Larry Johnson, who, by the way, is going to be on the show later this week to talk about that. We're going to be real interested in hearing what he had to say. And if we can find the video in English, some of his comments, we're going to play some of those too. But
Danny, if I can interject, I think we have to advise Larry. He was the only one on the panel that didn't have knee-high socks. He was the only one where we could see his shins. Now, normally, we call Larry the Shirt Johnson for a reason. But I think we got to pull him aside and let him in on some fashion advice here.
Fox as well. That if we add that to the repertoire. Well, thank you.
He wears the tie. Okay, he wears the tie, and so.
He did. Yeah, we'll definitely be bringing that up later this week. Don't miss that show. Be on the lookout for it. But let's get to what Lavrov said, because he said a number of things here which were pretty important. And the series that we have them here in order, by the way, are kind of increasing importance. But with the first one here, he was asked in one of these panels, how much of this is Ukraine by itself, and how much is this? And I think the context of the question here was, how much of this attack that happened in deep inside Russia with the bomber fleet, did it have foreign help?
The Ukrainian side is doing everything possible, but it would be absolutely helpless without the support of the British. Although you never know, probably by inertia, some US special forces would be involved in that. But the British are actually behind all those things, I'm 100% sure.
Okay, so I don't think that anyone would argue that the British and French, Germans, and the United States, especially going back to the Biden administration, but apparently from some comments even from Trump recently, there's still some help from the United States going on there. The question is, though, what is the ramifications for this? Because, I mean, if we like reverse the script here and we were fighting, I mean, I pray to God this doesn't ever happen, but let's say that we got into a war with Iran in the Middle East, and then all of a sudden Russia openly, not even hiding it, said, yeah, we're going to help Iran defend itself. And they're giving them, whether it's S-400, S-500, Iskander missiles or whatever, and all of a sudden it starts hitting American ships and killing American troops. I mean, we would be losing it. We'd be ready to go nuclear war or something. But Russia has been incredibly restrained so far. Is that because A, they fear escalation, so they'll just take the hit, or B, because they can't respond? How do you see it?
No, Russia can respond, and actually, United Kingdom has plenty of juicy targets outside the Akrotiri air base in Cyprus, for example. Russians can sink one or two ships if it comes down to it. The issue here, it has nothing to do with Russians taking a hit. It's just that Russians are very litigious, if you wish. They're very judicially, oriented in this respect, because the game is for the global south. Russia cannot go and very easily turn their MI6 headquarters, into the parking lot, which it could be done easily. The point is that you have to be restrained in a sense that as a civilized country. And we have to keep in mind one very important thing. Russia will help Iran, though, but Iran has its own capabilities. God forbid it happens. But the point is that essentially, United Kingdom has been involved together with CIA in the terrorism activity in Russia. Terrorism is different, and that's what it is. The issue has to be framed in this way. Can we imagine if Russians will go and start blowing their trains in Great Britain, in UK, or blow up their military leaders or something like that? That is absolutely different, especially when civilians begin to suffer. And that's the whole thing. We need to clearly separate the situation with the military hardware.
So we've seen Russia over the last 4 or 5 months to at least high-profile general officers that were assassinated in Moscow itself. Why have we not seen a commensurate assassination of Ukrainian generals somewhere else?
Well, now you will see it. Well, actually, truth to be told, number of their high-ranking officers was killed. It's just that Russians don't do it in this way, which is sheer assassination terrorism, essentially. No, Russia has long-range fires, not of weapons to deal with this. But the point is that this is a different game now. And once the terrorism label have been brought up on the highest political level, everything changes, because as what Mr. Lavrov already stated, what he stated today, which is critical, when he said, we don't know how Trump is informed, but we know the CIA, MI6, and other people, where they are. And essentially, well, next thing, which will be, it's a warning. If they want to get out, they can get out, but not for long. And after that, it's going to be, they will be killed. Simple as that. And
now, there's one other thing that Sergei Lavrov mentioned today, more an observation, which I think is accurate. And then the question is going to be and then what, and the so what. What he was talking about was in the beginning of the special military operation, or what the West calls a war, you had the Europeans were emphatic about saying they wanted the strategic defeat of Russia. They actually wanted to defeat Russia, or, at least harm them. But that was the effect. Now, then it's kind of like, no, now it's more like we want to degrade Russia. So it's like the goalposts have big time moved, but they're still trying to get it. Watch how he said it.
in rhetoric of Ursula von der Leyen or former head of the European Council, Michel, and others like Kaja Kallas. Most of European leaders are saying that support for Ukraine needs to be continued so that it could defeat Russia and then would defeat, well, first they said it would need to defeat Russia, now it needs not to lose to Russia, and now they need to support it with ammunition. But they're saying that Ukraine deserves our support because it defends the European values.
You know, at some point, Andrei, you got to say, all right, we wanted to defeat it first. Now, even they recognize, the Europeans, that you're not going to defeat Russia. That is, even they can't deny that anymore. You can spin that all day long. It's not. So they've changed the turn narrative now. Well, we just don't want to lose to Russia. But you're going to. Why would the West continue to pursue a policy that just cannot succeed?
Fanatical hatred of Russian and Russian people. For most Europeans, I don't know, I am on record, but whatever the percentage, but majority, 55, 65%, I don't know. But for majority of Europeans, Russians are subhumans. I'm Slav, I'm subhuman. I'm subhuman in the eyes of the Washington establishment. Let's recall James Clapper, who stated that Russians are genetically predispositioned to steal, so I'm genetically damaged material because I'm Russian. This is how Western elites think. This is, and especially when you have, for example, Germany, and guess what? Who is von der Leyen? I mean, they had their parents or grandparents who were in Wehrmacht or SS. What do you expect? They never recovered from the trauma of being utterly defeated by Red Army. They hate Russians. So, and that same goes for the majority. I have many European friends. Some of them are very well connected, and they write me all the time, including in private and openly in my discussion. Andrei, you don't know even the half of it. I know that majority of Germans hate Russians. I mean, what is the percentage is different, and they can hate them for different reasons. But it has to be understood. Western Europe especially, they hate Russians as subhumans, as the other. And this is cultural and racial attitude which existed for, if you look at Russian history, forget about Mongol Tatars, yoke. I mean, this was Western Europe, which was invading Russia non-stop, starting from the 11th century. And then you have Alexander Nevsky, then you have the Polish invasions, then you have Napoleon, you have just non-stop, the wave after wave from Europe going, invading Russians, killing, committing atrocities. And why? And when people say, oh, World War II, Germany, no. People do not understand. It wasn't Germany. It was the unified, combined Europe. French collaborated just beautifully with Nazi Germany. Italians had two armies in the Eastern Front. Hungarians had the army on the Eastern Front. So you look intensively. Finns played a key role in the siege of Leningrad. So you look at this. This is not just Germany. These are Europeans. For them, under different pretexts. First, it is the Tsarist totalitarian society, backward, Russian animals, those Asiatic hordes. Then it's racially inferior. Then today, everything continues with the same thing. And we have to face it. It is what it is. That's the attitude. And
you talk about the attitude, that also tends into the values. One of the other things I found interesting that Sergei Lavrov said in that clip right there was he was quoting von der Leyen. He could have added in Starmer and Macron, because all of them have variously said a version of this. Ukraine, to include Zelensky, by the way, Ukraine is fighting for European values. That's why we're continuing to fight, to defend our values from Russian aggression, is the way they characterize it. But then one has to ask the question, okay, when you look at, take away all the emotion about it and just look at it in isolation, you see, okay, I could go back further, but we'll just start in December 2021 and go all the way through. There's been one side that is constantly looking for diplomacy, constantly offering off-ramps and trying to get it. And then one side is only wanting to ramp up more military operations here. And that side ain't the Russians. And one has to ask, what is the value that the Western Europeans are trying to promote?
Well, it's all simulacra. It's 1984. Orwell. It's Orwellian language. Democracy. There is no democracy in Europe because European Commission are a bunch of the unelected bureaucrats which essentially stomp on whatever could have been democratic. When anybody tells me that UK is democracy, I'm sorry, did they try to dissolve their Chamber of Lords, which is by inheritance? And so when you look at this, it's all for the show. The reality is they need to, which they did really well, they need to turn this, which it will be turned into, anybody who wants to debate me on this issue, it's not going to help. They do not have ability, European population, and they do not want, what many people do not understand, to do so that much. That essentially Europe will be turned into the totalitarian concentration camp, very similar to 1984. They will be talking about democracy. They will be installing all those LGBTQ, whatever. I can, So it's totally postmodernist, anti-Christian, post-Christian values. That Europe already is. And it will get much worse. And as one of the Russian member of Duma, member of parliament, and the member of the European Parliament, he stated, we speak to Europeans and say that, Jews, how about, you have this AfD and other people, trying to offer resistance. And he said, the answer is always the same from all Europeans there. Oh, we have enough police and dogs to put it down. And they do. And they do. Look at France, what is happening. And essentially, Europe was emasculated. So it's almost psychiatric issue, okay? We need to talk here at a much deeper cultural and psychological level what is happening with Europe. And it will be totalitarian concentration camp. And that was the idea from the Washington neocon establishment, that eventually Europe could be mobilized and be used as a ram against Russia. Ukraine was one of the, so to speak, attempts. But of course, it's ended in disaster. But that's what they thought. They think that they are good strategists. There are no good strategists anywhere near in Washington, D.C. They don't know what strategy is. There are good strategists in the United States, but they are nowhere near levels of power. Mostly of those people are. And that's what Washington is. And yes, they hate Russians. And look at neocons, who they are. Those people, under different pretexts, they cannot forgive. Let's be very honest, even straighter to the point. They hate Russian orthodoxy, Russian Christian Orthodox beliefs, because they view them, and it across all kinds of things, including the Christian Zionists, for example, because in the United States, who are one of the bases for for example, neocons staying in power. They elect those pro-Israeli people. They elect those, controlling media, and as a result, they have no reasons to love Russians. For some, some of them think that this generation of Russians are guilty of pogroms, for example. Okay.
In the last few minutes here, I want to cover one last thing that Sergei Lavrov said here, which I think is really important to kind of wrap this up. So Europe can say whatever it wants. It can hate Russians, or it can have policies that are 1984 like, etc. They can, like Zalinskys, be detached from reality and say words that all day long. But at the end of the day, everything will come down. It does come down to reality on the ground. And it sounds to me like I heard a categorically different and saw a different face from Vladimir Putin last week when he was announcing this issue about the terrorist and how he can't even negotiate with the terrorist leader, like what he's now calling Zelensky. His face, his whole way he described things and his tone of voice was different. Well, I hear something. I'd like your view from Lavrov here, because he's now saying, yeah, we've been trying to do diplomacy all the time throughout this war for off-ramps. But now, and this was echoed actually by Medvedev last week, that said that we already reached our last chance for a diplomatic end. Now then, the Istanbul 12-point plan was not a negotiation. It was basically a terms of surrender. And then now here Lavrov's talking about where his diplomacy are today.
So another example when diplomacy is still needed, that's the Ukrainian conflict. Our best diplomats are the fighters on the front line, our fighters on the front line.
So I don't know why they had that picture of that other guy, but that was Sergei Lavrov talking in the background.
Yeah.
But he's now saying our diplomats are the fighters on the ground. Ergo, we're going to win the war through our diplomacy and military. How do you interpret that?
Oh, no, that's exactly what he is. I mean, he used the figure of speech. Of course, Russian diplomacy, Russian diplomatic corps was always extremely important. So in this respect, he says really nothing new. But the applause and all that was in appreciation of the activity of Russian diplomats who maintain and help maintain this conflict, if you wish, a war, a special military operation, within the limited frame, so to speak, not allowing it to spill into the global conflict. And there's no doubt there's a huge merit in this of the Russian diplomacy and diplomatic corps. That's what he meant. But the reality is, if you read attentively his points, and this is what he says, as he said today, I'm just quoting him, that I don't know how and who informs President of the United States about the operations which Ukrainian regime conducts against our country, but that we know that a huge number of American advisors sit in the SBU building. That's the fact. Nobody ever withdrew them. So that we know that the other instructors from those countries work there. It's also the fact. But he states after that, special operation in Ukraine will continue. But in parallel, Russia is ready with the diplomatic measures. And what is the most important, he stated today, was the fact that everything what is happening on the ground will have the judicial or legitimate, so to speak, form. They will be adopted, they will be accepted, which is their diplomatic pigeon speak or pigeon language of 6, maybe 7 oblasts Ukraine will lose.
And so, you've kind of partially answered the question I was about to ask. Where do you see this going in say, the next 6, 9, maybe even 12 months? Is it going to be just a continued slow grind on the front to see how long the Ukraine side can maintain fidelity of its armed forces? Because it's hard for me to imagine that Russia's short and satisfying itself with anything short of its maximalist objectives at this point.
Regime of Zelensky will be eliminated. We know this now. And that obviously will present the new political dynamics inside whatever will be left of Ukraine. Russians are already deep in, they are actually around 10 kilometers from Sumy. So it's pretty much
10 kilometers.
Yeah, about 10, 13, depends, So, and now they are in Dnipropetrovsk. 90th Tank Division already is in. There are actually more active operations on the right bank of Dnieper. And obviously there is, it's Minister of Defense. I don't think it's any kind of misinformation. I think it meant to be seen. Russian troops are training now constantly with the armor to force or cross the large rivers. You can look it up. It's all over the place, they show the training for this. So we know where it is all going. And now that we have the situation which they say, I'll give you just example. The day before yesterday, this night it got it too. Kharkov is being, absolutely, every single industrial plant that everything there is going to be is being eliminated as we speak. Kharkov alone, 2 days, the one night before, received, apart from all kinds of Iskanders and Kinjals, it received 50 geraniums. And people were outraged, why? Apart from the fact that that night Russia was using all kinds of the geraniums, drones all over the place. People were saying, why 50? Well, actually, Russia can use per 24-hour period up to 500 geraniums. That tells you a little bit about industry. So, and you can expect the escalation of this. And this week, Vladimir Putin is holding the extensive meeting with Security Council to discuss, and get this, to discuss response to the terrorist act. So whatever is coming after that, we can only sit and, speculate. But that's what Vladimir Putin stated himself.
So that's in addition to the Security Council meeting he had last week, where he had made that big statement that was on television. There's another one coming this week.
Yes, and he stated himself the agenda. It will be in relation to the discussion of the measures to, well, Putin speaks obviously always diplomatically, to the terrorist acts against Russia. And after that, he will go and talk to people of other kinds of, ways of life, so to speak, award them with all those, so just regular, public relations thing. But before that, it will be a meeting with the Security Council.
So now a number of these drone attacks that have happened since that speech was made last week, and there's been at least 3 major rounds that were, I think, increasingly set records for how many were fired. Some recording records, or some outlets rather, say that last night's was a new total number of records in terms of drone and missile strikes, etc. Can we expect that's going to either maintain that saturation of fire, or is it even possible to increase it from the Russian side? Do they have the capacity?
I want to quote Putin from 2 years ago. We didn't start anything yet. And just for people to understand what is going to happen now, all those people, which was essentially stated by Lavrov, the SBU, Kur, Budanov, all those people will be killed. If there's CIA or MI6 guys, too bad. They will be killed too. So it's like, there is a wonderful Soviet cartoon, actually. It's about Leopold the cat. And the thing about it, he fights all those 2 mice who are arrogant and jerks, but he is always like wearing slippers, nice guy, nice cat with the eyeglasses, reading books. And he says, guys, let's live like friends. And he constantly thinks until he gets the pill, after he got, they got him, he gets the pill, which is called azverin, which literally means that becoming an animal. And he goes like on the rampage for like 5 minutes until those, mice are completely scared, So the Russians took this azverin pill, and that's it. I mean, there will be no red lines anymore.
Well, I think we missed our last chance for peace. I think we had it and we gave it away. And now I think the only thing that's going to be left is a kinetic victory that they're talking about. But we'll see. And we'll certainly be looking to see what happens following this next National Security Council meeting by Putin. And we'll be looking for Larry Johnson later in the week about what he experienced there. And of course, we will ask you about the socks naturally.
Socks, I have some connections in Russia. I wear only 100% cotton socks. I can help you on that.
That's good. We'll recommend that to him when we see him. But in the meantime, thank you guys very much. And if you get one time a week with Andrei Martyanov isn't enough for you, and I can't imagine why it would be, go to Smoothie X12 where he makes all kinds of videos here where you can get updates every day if you want to. So anything new on there you want to point out?
No, I mean, same old. I'm pretty consistent. I do what I do,
Yeah, same old is pretty good though. So anyway, well, appreciate that, and as always, grateful for your insights, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
My pleasure, Danny. Anytime.
All right, and thank you guys very much. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.